Hey, it's Clara. I never thought I'd be sitting here telling you this. At dinner, my son-in-law called me a parasite. But what happened the next morning? His entire company vanished overnight. My own family turned on me, and for years I was just a pawn in their game. They lied, they manipulated, they took everything. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part was realizing that I'd been slowly pushed into a corner for years, and now, finally, the truth is coming out. How far will I go to take back what's mine? You won't believe what happens next. I stepped into the house, the familiar smell of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes greeting me. It was a holiday dinner, the kind of gathering where everything was supposed to be perfect. Smiling faces, happy chatter, and the clinking of glasses. But as soon as I walked through that door, I could feel the weight of something heavy in the air, something I couldn't quite place, but knew was there. I put on my best smile, though it felt like it was glued to my face. I'd spent years in this house, a mother, a caretaker, a provider, and yet, somehow, tonight felt different. The walls, painted in bright colors, didn't feel warm. They felt like a cage. "Clara, you look great, as usual," my daughter Tanya said, pulling me into a tight hug. "Thank you, darling," I said, squeezing her back, though my heart wasn't in it. I looked around, seeing my son-in-law Marcus already sitting at the table, his eyes flicking over to me before turning back to his phone. The kids were running around, laughing, blissfully unaware of the unspoken tension in the room. Tanya had always been the perfect daughter on the outside. On the inside, she had her struggles, but she kept them hidden well. Marcus, though, was a different story. He'd always been polite on the surface, but I knew he didn't truly respect me, not in the way a daughter's husband should respect her mother. I took my seat at the table, setting down my purse with care, as I listened to the conversation unfold around me. They were talking about the kids, their schoolwork, a vacation they were planning. It all seemed so trivial, so disconnected from the thoughts swirling in my head. I wasn't part of that world. My role here was to smile, nod, and keep quiet. As I placed a spoonful of mashed potatoes on my plate, Marcus's voice broke through my thoughts. "Clara, I don't know how you do it," he said, his tone dripping with something I couldn't quite identify. "You're just a parasite living off my family's generosity. I don't know how you can keep taking and never giving back." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, my breath catching in my throat, but I swallowed it all down. I wasn't going to react. Not here, not now, not in front of my daughter and grandkids. A sudden silence fell over the table. Tanya's face tightened, her hand hovering over her plate, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. I knew her well enough to see the discomfort in her eyes, but she didn't speak up. She never did when Marcus went too far. I stared down at my plate, my mind racing. I'd spent so many years pouring myself into this family. I had raised Tanya on my own, worked long hours, and sacrificed my own dreams just to make sure they had everything they needed. And this was how I was repaid. Not with thanks, not with appreciation, but with insults and disregard. I could feel my fingers tighten around my fork, my nails digging into my palm, but I didn't let go. "Clara?" Tanya's voice broke the silence again, and I looked up to meet her gaze. She was trying to gauge my reaction, trying to figure out what I was thinking, but I wasn't going to show her. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile that felt as thin as paper. "Just tired, It's been a long day." Marcus let out a soft, dismissive laugh. "Yeah, I bet. It must be exhausting living off other people's kindness." I couldn't let it go. The words dug into me like a knife, twisting and turning with every breath I took, but I stayed silent, because if I spoke, if I let it out, it would only make things worse. It always did. The laughter from the rest of the family seemed so hollow. I could hear it, but it didn't reach me. Not anymore. I felt like an outsider in my own family, and I had no one to turn to. Tanya wouldn't stand up for me. She never did. She loved her husband too much. And Marcus? He was never going to change. The evening dragged on. We ate, we laughed, but I could barely keep up the charade. I kept my eyes down, focusing on my food, on the moments where I could escape into my own mind. But the words he'd spoken were always there, hanging in the air, suffocating me. As the dinner wound down and people began to clear their plates, I stood up to help. My movements were slow, deliberate, as if I could control the storm inside of me by keeping my hands busy. Tanya came over to me, her eyes filled with guilt, but she didn't say anything. What could she say? I had been silent for so long, silenced by my own fear, my own sense of duty to my family. But tonight, something inside me shifted. Something inside me snapped. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it, deep in my bones. As the laughter echoed around the table, my heart sank further, but I said nothing. I knew I had to make a choice, and it was coming. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, the kind of peaceful noise that felt at odds with the storm raging inside my chest. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the room in soft golds and blues, but I couldn't shake off the heaviness in my heart. Last night's words still echoed in my mind. Parasite. The sting of Marcus's insult had settled into my bones, a dull ache that lingered as the morning unfolded. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it kept coming back, each time sharper than before. I sat up in bed, the quiet of the house pressing in around me. Tanya and the kids were still asleep, unaware of the turmoil I was facing. I rubbed my face, trying to push the sleep away, but it wasn't the kind of exhaustion you can just sleep off. It was a deeper, more personal kind of tiredness, the kind that seeps into your soul when you've spent years being overlooked, undervalued, and mistreated. I had given so much of myself to this family, and yet it never felt like it was enough. As I made my way to the kitchen, I could still feel the weight of Marcus's words hanging in the air. I opened the fridge and pulled out the eggs, but my hands trembled as I cracked them into the pan. What kind of mother, what kind of woman, allows herself to be treated this way? The quiet hum of the stove was the only sound in the room, and I let myself sink into the stillness for a moment. My mind drifted back to the years I had spent taking care of everyone else. My daughter, my son-in-law, the grandkids, making sure they had what they needed while my own needs were put on the back burner. I could hear Marcus's voice in my head again. You're just a parasite living off my family's generosity. I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized something that made my stomach churn. Maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. I had given, and never once asked for anything in return. I had swallowed my pride, stayed silent, and now I was paying the price for it. But that was going to change. The eggs started to sizzle in the pan, and I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The anger, the hurt, they were still there, but now I could feel something else stirring beneath them, something stronger, something that told me I didn't have to stay silent anymore. I reached for the salt and pepper, seasoning the eggs like I had done so many times before. But today, I added a little extra force to each motion. It was as though I was preparing for something more than just breakfast. I knew I had to make a choice. I could let this go on, continue to be the person everyone expected me to be, the quiet, self-sacrificing mother who always put others first. Or I could stand up for myself, finally demand the respect I deserved, even if it meant risking the very relationships I had spent my whole life nurturing. The sound of my phone ringing broke my train of thought, and I glanced at the caller ID. Unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "Is this Clara Simmons?" a male voice asked. "Yes," I replied, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Who's this? This is Stephen Caldwell. I'm a lawyer, and I'm calling to inform you of some changes in your family's financial arrangements. There's a matter that requires your attention. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Financial arrangements? What was this about? Why was I just hearing about it now? My heart started to race as my mind raced with possibilities. I'm not sure I understand, I said, my voice faltering. There's been a shift in your daughter's assets. It's in the will, he continued. I'd like to arrange a time for you to come in and discuss it. It's quite urgent. A chill ran through me. My daughter's assets? A will? Why hadn't she told me about this? Can you meet today? The lawyer asked. I didn't know what to say. The weight of the call was suffocating. Last night's insult was still fresh in my mind, and now this news that I wasn't even aware of. It felt like another betrayal, another layer of neglect. My family had been keeping secrets from me, and I hadn't even known it. I'll come by, I finally said, my voice firm. When and where? I'll send you the details, he said, and the call ended. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The weight of the news settled in my chest like a stone. I didn't know how this all fit together, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in the background anymore. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like this. This was just the beginning of something bigger, something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but it was happening, whether I liked it or not. I hung up the phone, the weight of the news settling into my chest, but it was only the beginning of the storm I was about to face. The day felt different, like something was shifting in the air. I hadn't slept much, restless thoughts swirling around in my head like a never-ending storm. The memory of the phone call, the lawyer's voice, cold and detached, kept repeating in my mind. I couldn't escape it. The weight of that conversation hung over me, adding to the ache that Marcus's words had already planted deep inside me. Parasite. I could still hear him, his words cutting through the air at dinner, while everyone else laughed and carried on, blissfully unaware of the damage being done. I stayed silent, but now, as I sipped my coffee, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I had stayed silent for too long. The quiet of the morning felt almost suffocating. The soft hum of the coffee maker, the faint rustle of the trees outside. None of it seemed to matter. It was as if I was in a different world, separated from everything I had known. My mind kept circling back to the betrayal, not just from Marcus, but from my daughter, Tanya. She had let him treat me like that. She had let him belittle me in front of everyone. The anger had been building up, slow but sure, like a storm gathering strength. I had spent years taking care of everyone, putting my needs last. Every time I helped, I was met with indifference or worse, and now, after everything, I was still being treated like I didn't matter. I had given my time, my energy, my love, and it wasn't enough. What was I to do now? What did I owe them? I stood up from the kitchen table, my heart pounding. I wasn't going to let this go, not this time. The years of sacrifice, of staying quiet, of accepting less than I deserved, they were over. It was time to make a change. I could feel the anger tightening in my chest, but with it came something else. Resolve. I wasn't just angry. I was determined. I was going to stand up for myself, even if it meant I had to face the people I loved most. I couldn't let them walk all over me anymore. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had made up my mind. I would confront Marcus. I would tell him what he had done, how he had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. But first, I had to prepare. I changed into something simple, black pants and a loose blouse. I wanted to be comfortable, but also in control. I stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, staring at myself. My reflection seemed unfamiliar. I looked older than I felt, the lines on my face deeper than I remembered. But there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Strength. I could still see it, buried beneath the hurt and anger. It was still there, and I was going to use it. I left the house, my mind racing, and drove over to Tanya's. My palms were clammy against the steering wheel, but I kept my focus. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. When I arrived, Tanya was already inside, and Marcus was lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel it settling over me like a weight, but I wasn't going to be intimidated. Marcus looked up as I walked in, his face going from relaxed to guarded in an instant. Tanya was standing by the kitchen counter, not meeting my eyes. I couldn't tell if she knew what was coming, but I was past caring about that now. I took a deep breath, stepping into the living room. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About last night," I said, my voice steady. "And about everything that's been going on." He scoffed, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He knew I wasn't going to let this slide. "Look, I don't know what you're getting at, Clara, but no," I cut him off. "Don't try to play me. You called me a parasite last night, and I'm done staying silent about it. You've treated me like I'm nothing, and I'm tired of it." Tanya's eyes flicked to me, then quickly back to the counter. I could feel the weight of her silence, but I wasn't going to let it stop me. I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. Marcus shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "I didn't mean it like that," he said, his voice defensive. "It's just that you've been taking advantage of us." "Taking advantage?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "I've been taking care of this family for years, putting everyone else's needs above mine. And this is how I'm repaid? With disrespect and insults?" There was a brief silence, the kind that felt thick with unspoken truths. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I held it in check. I needed to stay calm, to make my point clear. "I've been patient," I continued. "I've been quiet, trying to keep the peace, but that ends now. I'm not going to sit here and let you call me names, especially not after everything I've done for this family." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, there was a long pause, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "I'm done being the one who gives, the one who sacrifices," I said. "You don't get to treat me like this anymore." Just as I thought the confrontation was coming to an end, Marcus's expression shifted. There was something else there, something darker. "You don't know the half of it, Clara," he said, his voice quieter now. "There's more going on here than you think." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked to the desk in the corner of the room, opening a drawer and pulling out a few papers. He threw them onto the table between us. "Your daughter's inheritance," he said flatly. "It's not just yours to take anymore. I've been handling it all. You didn't know that, did you?" My heart sank. The betrayal stung even deeper now, the weight of it pressing against my chest like a vice. The shock was almost too much to process, but I forced myself to focus. I stared at him, knowing the battle had only just begun. What I thought was a conversation turned into a war. The morning after our confrontation, I found myself sitting in the same chair, staring out the window, feeling the weight of my decision pressing down on me. The silence in the house was deafening. I hadn't expected everything to change so quickly. I thought I could simply confront him, say my piece, and somehow find peace again. But peace felt like a distant dream now. The anger from the night before still simmered beneath my skin, but now, as I sat there, it was mixed with something else, uncertainty. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. Would they cut me off completely? Would they realize what they'd done and apologize? It didn't seem likely, but the thought lingered. I had spent my entire life holding my tongue, putting the needs of others first. But now, standing up for myself had shifted everything. There was no going back. The ripple effects had already begun, and I could feel the tension in the air, waiting for the next wave to hit. The phone rang, and I glanced down at it, my heart skipping a beat. It was Tanya. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice cautious. My stomach twisted. I hadn't expected her to reach out so soon. "What about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. I want to understand why you did it, why you had to say those things to Marcus." I could feel the anger rise again, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't the moment to lash out. "Because it's the truth, Tanya. And it's time someone said it." "But you've always been so quiet. You never spoke up before," she said. "Why now? Why after everything?" The question stung. She didn't understand. She couldn't, not yet. "I'm tired of being invisible in my own family," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I've spent my life supporting all of you, and I'm done being treated like I don't matter." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could tell she didn't know how to respond. "But Mom, I know what you're going to say," I cut her off. "That I shouldn't have done it like that. But you don't get it, Tanya. You don't know what it's like to be so damned invisible that even when you give everything, no one notices. So I spoke up. For once I did." There was a heavy silence, and then she sighed. "I understand. I just don't want this to break everything." "I'm not asking for anything from you, Tanya. I'm asking for respect," I replied, my voice shaking with emotion. We hung up, and I sat there holding the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. The ripple effects were happening. Tanya didn't get it, not yet, but I knew she would have to. What I had done wasn't just about me anymore. It was about changing the way I had been treated for so long. The day dragged on, the hours stretching into an endless loop of thoughts and fears. I couldn't ignore the consequences any longer. My son-in-law, Marcus, he would never look at me the same way again. I had no illusions about that. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't just shrink back into the shadows. Not anymore. As I sat in the living room, my mind kept replaying the conversation with Tanya. But then, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find my best friend, Ruby, standing on the other side, her face grim. "Clara," she said softly, "I need to talk to you. It's about Marcus." I felt my heart skip. "What now?" Ruby stepped inside, her eyes darting around nervously. She lowered her voice. "I overheard something. A conversation between Marcus and some lawyer. He's been hiding things from you, Clara. For months." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, glancing back at the door as if to make sure no one else was listening. "He's been manipulating your finances, your savings, your property. It's all tied up in some deal that you didn't know about." "I'm not sure of the details, but I know enough to tell you that he's been working behind your back." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stumbled back against the door frame, my head spinning. How do you know this?" Ruby's voice dropped even lower. "I overheard him talking to the lawyer. They've been setting things up for a while. They're trying to take everything from you, Clara." I felt a rush of heat flood my body. My blood was boiling, but beneath that anger, there was something else. Something that almost felt like relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Marcus had been playing me for a fool. And now, I knew just how deep his betrayal ran. "I couldn't believe what I was hearing," Ruby continued. "But I had to tell you, this is bigger than just the insults, Clara. He's been planning this for a while. You're not just a target in his eyes, you're an obstacle." I felt the weight of it all sink in, deeper than I ever thought possible. The man I had trusted, the man who had been in my family for years, had been plotting against me all along. And now, I was just beginning to see the full picture. The events of the last few days had worn me thin, and I couldn't escape them, not even in the quiet of my own home. The reality of what I had just discovered about Marcus hit me hard. The betrayal was deeper than I could have imagined. I thought I'd prepared myself for the worst, but finding out that he had been siphoning money from me, the person who had always been there for him, always helped, left me breathless. I tried to push the thoughts away for a moment, but they kept clawing their way back. I couldn't outrun this. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen the truth. I knew I couldn't just sit back anymore. I had to do something. The weight of everything that had been done to me pressed against my chest, and yet, for the first time in a long time, I felt something else stirring inside me. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was anger. And that anger was starting to fuel a fire I didn't even know I had left. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Tanya. I wasn't sure I was ready to talk to her yet, but I picked it up anyway. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice uncertain. "About what?" I replied, my voice heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. "I don't know, Mom. I've been thinking about what happened with Marcus, and the things you said. It's just, this isn't like you. You've always been so quiet, so patient with us. Why did you do it?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Why had I done it? Why had I waited so long to finally stand up for myself? I let out a sigh before answering. "Because, Tanya, I've been invisible for too long. I've put myself last for years. I've been treated like I don't matter, and I'm done. I'm done being quiet, done being the person everyone ignores. I can't keep living like that." I heard her pause on the other end. I could tell she was struggling to understand. "But Mom, you didn't have to go that far. You could have talked to him. We could have worked it out." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "No, Tanya. I've tried. I've tried to keep the peace, but they don't listen. None of them do. Marcus doesn't listen. He's been taking from me, and you didn't even notice." There was silence for a beat. I knew she was processing what I said, but it didn't matter now. I was done hiding. I wasn't going to keep swallowing my pain just to keep the peace. After we ended the call, I stood there for a while, staring at the phone in my hand. I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or just exhausted. But I knew one thing. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The day dragged on. I went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, doing the little things that filled my time, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about Marcus, how he had used me, how he had stolen from me, how my own daughter had stood by and let it happen. It wasn't just the money. It was the years. The years of my life spent giving and sacrificing, only to be taken advantage of. My body ached from the weight of it, and my heart was heavy with the knowledge that things would never be the same. I couldn't pretend anymore. That's when it hit me. I had to protect myself. It wasn't just about me standing up to Marcus anymore. It was about taking control of my future. I couldn't let him take any more from me. I couldn't let my family walk all over me anymore. I took a deep breath and grabbed the phone. I called a lawyer. My hands were shaking, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I wasn't just protecting my money. I was protecting my dignity, my peace, my life. It was time to make sure he paid for what he'd done. Later that evening, Marcus came over to the house. His face looked just like it always did, calm, collected, like he didn't have a care in the world. But I could see the cracks now. I could see through him. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat. "Hey, what happened the other night? It was out of line. You shouldn't have done it." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. But what's done is done. I'm not going to pretend anymore. You've been taking from me, from this family for years, and I'm done letting you get away with it. His face shifted, but I didn't back down. You think you can just destroy everything like this? You've always been weak, Clara. You let everyone walk all over you. No, I said firmly. I've let you walk all over me, but not anymore. I've spent my whole life helping you, but I'm done being used. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're doing. You'll regret this. No, I said, standing tall. I won't. But you will. The conversation shifted then, the air thick with the tension between us. He denied everything, of course. He tried to gaslight me, make me feel like I was crazy. But the truth was out there. I had the evidence. And then, just as I thought we might be done, he dropped the bomb. You don't even know the half of it, he said quietly. What you've been dealing with, it's bigger than you think. I've been making plans. I've been securing my future. I froze. The words hit harder than anything he'd said before. My heart pounded as I stared at him. What are you talking about? His lips curled into a smug grin. You'll find out soon enough. I'm not the one who's been playing all the games, Clara. But I'm about to show you how the real game is played. And that was when it hit me. The financial manipulation was only the beginning. I had been living a lie for years, and now I knew it was time to make him pay for everything. For all the lies, all the theft, all the manipulation. The breaking point had arrived. The morning after my confrontation with Marcus, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The adrenaline from our exchange still lingered in my veins, but now I had to focus. I couldn't let this go. I had made a decision, and now it was time to see it through. There was no turning back. The reality of what I had done began to settle in, and with it, a sense of resolve. I started by making a plan. I reached out to a few people I trusted, family, close friends, even some old allies who knew the truth about Marcus. They needed to be on my side now, and I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. It wasn't going to be easy, and I was going to have to be strategic. But I was done being the passive observer. I was ready to take control. The tension was palpable as I walked through the motions of my daily routine. On the outside, everything looked normal. But inside, there was a storm brewing. Marcus was going to pay for what he'd done. He wasn't going to get away with it, but first, I had to protect myself. I contacted a lawyer, someone who could help me navigate the financial mess Marcus had created. I needed someone on my side, someone who could help me see through the web of lies and deception. It was time to stop letting people take advantage of me. I wasn't going to let Marcus control me anymore, but things didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. That afternoon, I ran into an old friend, someone I thought I could rely on. Her face was strained as she greeted me, and before I could even ask her what was going on, she spoke. I overheard something, she said quietly, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. Marcus. He's already working on a plan to frame you. He's trying to set you up. My heart dropped into my stomach. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked over her shoulder again, then leaned in closer. I heard him talking about it. He's setting everything up to make it look like you've been stealing from him. He's trying to ruin you, Clara. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My hands shook, and I had to steady myself against the wall. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was a full-blown attack on everything I had built. But I couldn't let it break me. I wasn't going to let Marcus get away with this. Not this time. Not after everything he had taken from me. I'd put up with enough. The conversation with my friend left me reeling, but it also lit a fire inside me. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about fighting back, about taking control of the narrative. I couldn't let Marcus get the upper hand. Not again. Later that night, after making some arrangements, I sat in front of my mirror, staring at my reflection. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity. It was about making sure that, when all was said and done, I would have something left of myself. I wasn't going to let him take that away. The next day, I confronted Marcus again. This time, the air was thick with tension. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but I was no longer afraid. I stood tall as I faced him, determined to get to the bottom of all of this. "I know what you're doing," I said, my voice steady. "I know you've been plotting behind my back, and I'm done. It's over, Marcus." His face twitched, a flicker of surprise passing through his eyes before he quickly masked it. "You don't know what you're talking about," he replied, his voice cold. "You're just imagining things." "I'm not imagining anything," I said, stepping closer. "I know exactly what you've been doing, and I won't let you get away with it. You've been using me for years, manipulating me, taking advantage of my kindness, but not anymore." He tried to backpedal, throwing out lies and excuses, but I wasn't listening. The truth was clear, and I wasn't going to back down. "You've made your move, but so have I," I said, my voice sharp. "And this time, I'm not letting you win." For a moment, there was silence between us. I saw the fury in his eyes, but I also saw fear. He knew, just as I did, that the power dynamics had shifted. He was no longer in control. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was cold, cruel. "You really think you've got it all figured out, don't you? You think you can take me down. You're just a woman who's too old for this fight." The words stung, but they only strengthened my resolve. "You're wrong," I said, my voice calm but filled with fire. "I may be older, but I'm stronger than you think, and you won't get away with this." And that's when it happened. He pulled out the document, an incriminating piece of evidence he thought would turn the tables on me. But I was ready. With a cold smile, I took the final document from the envelope and looked him in the eye. "You're not going to get away with this." I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection staring back at me with a mixture of weariness and determination. The battle had already begun, and now it was time to bring it to a head. I had spent years being manipulated, taken advantage of, and humiliated, but no longer. This was the moment of truth. My actions in the past few days had put me at the brink, and there was no turning back. The man who had tried to control my life, steal from me, and rob me of my dignity, Marcus, was about to pay for it all. The weight of the decision I had made the night before settled deeper into my bones as I thought about how everything had unraveled. The confrontation in the living room had ignited a fire inside me, one I had buried for too long. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. I wasn't going to be a pawn in anyone's game. The day stretched out before me, full of uncertainty, but I felt a strange sense of peace. I was going to expose the truth. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this. The phone call I had made to my lawyer had been the first step in ensuring that I had the power in this situation. I had gathered the evidence, but it wasn't enough to stop Marcus from spinning his own lies. I knew what I had to do: take everything he had, everything he thought he could hide, and throw it right in his face. It wasn't just about the financial manipulation anymore. It was the years of betrayal, the lies, the control. Marcus had underestimated me, thinking I was weak, thinking I wouldn't fight back. Well, I was about to show him just how wrong he was. As I prepared to confront him, my mind raced. I knew the stakes. I knew what this could cost me. But I also knew that this was my last chance to take back control of my life. I had nothing left to lose. I left the house, stepping into the bright morning light, my hands steady, but my heart pounding in my chest. I knew where to find him. I wasn't going to let him slither away. This time, it wasn't just me against him. It was me against the system he had built to entrap me. It was time for everything to be laid bare. I arrived at his office with a calm that masked the storm brewing inside me. His secretary tried to stop me, but I was already walking past her before she could finish her sentence. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. The door to his office creaked open. Marcus looked up from his desk, his eyes narrowing when he saw me standing in the doorway. I didn't give him a chance to speak. "I know everything, Marcus," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I know what you've been doing. I know what you've been trying to get away with." He chuckled, but it was a hollow laugh. "Clara, you have no idea what you're talking about." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, slamming it on his desk. The papers inside it were the proof, the final blow to his web of lies. His face turned pale as he saw what was inside. For the first time, I saw him falter. "You've been siphoning money from me for months," I said, feeling the power shift. "And you thought I wouldn't notice. You thought you could get away with it. But you were wrong." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His arrogance had always been his armor, but now it was crumbling. He wasn't the powerful man I once thought he was. He was nothing more than a coward hiding behind a facade of wealth and manipulation. "Do you have any idea how much you've hurt me?" I asked, my voice rising. "All these years you thought you could control me, use me, take from me without any consequences. But you're wrong. I'm not your fool anymore." Marcus stood up, trying to regain some control over the situation, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. "You're going to regret this," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." His words didn't scare me. They didn't even shake me. I had come too far, fought too hard to be intimidated now. "I'm done being afraid of you," I said. "And I'm done being a victim." With that, I turned and walked out of the office, leaving him in his mess. But the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. I had taken the first step, but now it was time for the final showdown. I had everything I needed. The truth was on my side, and there was no way Marcus could deny it. As I stepped out into the parking lot, I felt the weight of everything start to lift. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had taken back control, and nothing was going to stop me now. I went home and waited. I knew Marcus would try to find a way to fight back, to twist things around. But I was ready. I had everything set up. The legal papers were filed. The public exposure was imminent. The game was over for him. That evening, just as the sun began to set, I received the call. It was my lawyer, confirming that everything was in place. I could hear the satisfaction in their voice. "You did it, Clara. You won." The relief flooded through me, but it wasn't over. There was still one final confrontation left. I wasn't done yet. The phone rang again, and I glanced at the screen. It was Marcus. My heart raced, and I answered. "I know you're not finished yet," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "But this isn't over. You'll pay for this." I didn't flinch. "I don't think so, Marcus. You're done." I hung up the phone, the finality of it sinking in. I had won. The fight was over. The truth had come to light. But as I walked away from the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to come. The consequences were only just beginning. The truth had been exposed. The damage was done. Now, I stood at the threshold of a new chapter in my life, but it wasn't the victory I had imagined. The weight of everything that had happened, everything I had fought for, settled heavily on my shoulders. My actions had shaken my family to its core, and the consequences of that truth were still unfolding. But at the same time, a strange sense of clarity began to emerge. It was time for me to redefine who I was and what I stood for. I was no longer just a passive figure in the background of my own life. I spent the first few days processing everything that had happened. The confrontation with Marcus, the evidence, the final showdown, all of it had been a whirlwind. But now that the dust was settling, the full emotional weight of the battle hit me. There was pride, yes, pride in the strength I'd shown, pride in standing up for myself when I'd spent so long allowing others to dictate my worth. But there was also regret. Regret for the sacrifices I'd made, for the family I had tried to protect, only to find out that I had been nothing more than a pawn in their game. I had spent my life putting others first, making sure everyone else's needs were met while ignoring my own. My daughter, my son-in-law, they were the ones I had bent over backwards for, the ones I thought I was protecting. But now I saw them for what they truly were: manipulative, deceitful, and, most painfully, ungrateful. The betrayal went deeper than I had ever imagined. But as much as the truth hurt, it also gave me power. Power I hadn't realized I'd had all along. I wasn't just the victim in this story. I was the one who had made the choice to fight. And now, that decision had set me free. The ripple effects of my actions spread through my family. Some reacted with anger, others with confusion. My daughter had been one of the hardest to face. Her shock was palpable when the truth about Marcus's manipulations came to light. She wanted to believe the best in him, but the evidence was undeniable. The look in her eyes when she realized how deeply he had lied to her, it broke my heart. But I couldn't back down. I couldn't apologize for exposing the truth. As much as I wanted to shield her from the harsh realities, I had learned that sometimes you have to let people face the truth, no matter how painful it is. There were other family members, too, who had been involved in some way, either directly or indirectly. Some of them took Marcus's side, questioning my motives, claiming that I was trying to destroy the family. But others, people I'd least expected, showed their support. They saw the woman I had become and respected me for it. It wasn't easy, but I had come to understand that not everyone needed to understand me. Not everyone had to agree with what I did. But those who truly mattered, the ones who saw my strength, were the ones who would stay. But even in the midst of all this turmoil, I couldn't shake a sense of unease. As much as I had won, something still gnawed at me. The consequences of my actions weren't just felt by Marcus. They rippled through every corner of my life. There was no turning back, and for all the empowerment I had gained, there was a price to pay. The price of truth, I realized, wasn't just the betrayal I'd uncovered. It was the unraveling of my entire family dynamic. The more I uncovered, the more I saw just how deep the deception went. And there was one last revelation, one last piece of the puzzle that I hadn't anticipated. It came to me from an unexpected source, a close family friend, someone who had witnessed more than I had ever known. Through their eyes, I saw just how much my family had been complicit in the lies. There were things they had done behind my back, things that no one had ever told me. The truth, as painful as it was, had torn apart the world I had known. And now, I had to live with it. I found myself standing in front of the mirror once again, trying to reconcile everything. The pieces of my past were scattered around me, and I had to choose what to keep and what to let go. I knew I couldn't change the past. I couldn't erase the pain or the regret, but I could choose how I moved forward. Marcus had been exposed, but that wasn't the end of the story. The emotional toll it took on me, on my family, was something I couldn't fix in a day. I had to decide whether I would try to rebuild what was left or walk away from it all. Forgiveness was something I hadn't considered for a long time. But as I stood there, looking at the woman in the mirror, I realized that it wasn't forgiveness I needed. It was peace. The emotional turmoil I had faced, the anger, the frustration, the heartbreak, had all led me to this moment. I had come to understand that standing up for myself didn't mean tearing everything down. It meant knowing when to fight and when to let go, And so, I made my decision. It was time to let go of the past and step into the future, no matter how uncertain it might be. My life, now redefined, would be shaped by the choices I made today. The battle had been hard, and I had lost more than I'd ever anticipated. But in the end, I was still standing, stronger, wiser, and free. As the silence of the room enveloped us, I knew my decision was final, and there would be no going back. The silence of the house was different now, heavier, like the weight of everything that had happened. I sat there, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, it all felt like it had happened to someone else. But I knew it hadn't. It was my story, my life. I had fought hard for this moment, for the freedom that came with knowing the truth, no matter how much it had cost me. I thought about the days leading up to this, the confrontation, the revelations, the loss, and the strength I discovered within myself. I had never imagined that I would be the one to stand up for myself, to say, enough, when all I had known was how to sacrifice. But here I was, with the pieces of my life scattered in front of me, trying to figure out how to put them back together. The truth had changed everything. It had broken my family, but it had also set me free. And as painful as that was, I couldn't deny that it had given me something I never had before. Power. Power over my own life, over my own choices. But now, the weight of that power was something I had to learn to carry. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't undo what had been done, no matter how much I wished I could. What was left was the future, and the choice to shape it. I had spent so many years living for others, hiding behind the needs of my family, always second to everyone else. But now, I was standing in front of the mirror, a woman who had fought for herself, for her truth, and I realized that I had nothing left to prove to anyone. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't someone who could be pushed around anymore. The first real test of this newfound strength came when I faced my family. Some were angry, some were confused, and some simply didn't know what to say. I saw the fear in their eyes when they realized that the woman they had underestimated all these years had finally stood up and claimed her place. But I also saw something else, a spark of respect, and that was enough. But the consequences of everything that had happened were still unfolding. The final revelation about Marcus, the man I had trusted more than anyone, hit me harder than I expected. The hurt ran deep, but so did the relief. The truth was finally out, and while it changed everything, it also gave me control. The control to choose what I wanted to do next, to decide who I wanted to be in the wake of all of it. Some of my family would never understand. Some might never forgive me. And that was okay. It was time to stop living for others, time to stop apologizing for standing up for myself. The twist, the final truth, was that my actions had irrevocably changed my life and my family's future. I could see it clearly now. I had made choices that would forever alter the path ahead, not just for me, but for everyone involved. But what was left to do? I had fought for so long, and now it was time to decide what came next, forgiveness or revenge. That was the question. The moral dilemma was one I had to face head on. Could I forgive the people who had hurt me so deeply? Could I ever look them in the eye again and move forward? Or was it time to walk away, leaving the past behind, knowing that some things were too broken to fix? I thought about the years of sacrifice, the love I had given, the family I had built only to watch it crumble before my eyes. But I also thought about the woman I had become, the strength I had found, the courage I had summoned to fight for what was mine. And in that moment, I made a choice. I wasn't going back. The past would always be with me, but it no longer had the power to define me. I had broken the cycle of submission and sacrifice, and now I was free to build something new. The silence in the room was deafening as I made my final decision. My family would always be my family, But I would no longer let their actions control my fate. I had done what I had to do to survive. And now, I was ready to live for myself. I stood there, looking at the remnants of what was left, broken relationships, a fractured past. And I smiled. A small, bittersweet smile. Because, in that moment, I realized that everything I had gone through, all the pain and loss, had led me to this point. I was free. Free to choose the next step. Free to rebuild my life, not as a victim, but as a woman who had taken control of her destiny. And with that final step, I realized that the person I was always meant to be was waiting for me on the other side of all this pain. I was finally free.